Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. Finally, if you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide, available on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Most homeowners don't have the time or expertise to properly take care of their home, which causes costly issues to arise. That's where Kira Home Maintenance comes in. We're a full-service, routine maintenance company that was developed by a certified home inspector. Each quarter, we service our clients' homes following manufacturer's recommendations to properly maintain all the necessary appliances. We provide the materials and expertise to prolong the life of your property, creating a healthy and efficient environment for your family. From top to bottom, we'll maintain and service your home. To get started, we have a property inspection to determine what needs to be maintained, and a maintenance plan is created based on your preferences. From refrigerator coils to filters, vents, and drains, we do it all, and we do it well. Contact us today for your free routine maintenance inspection, and never worry about your maintenance again.
Bob Roark, are you ready to rock and roll? Riderflex podcast?
Let's get it, man.
Oh, for the audience, I just want everybody to know right now that the Riderflex podcast probably does not exist without Bob Roark. It's a true statement. I mean, you were the one that introduced us to podcasting, suggested that we did some podcasting way back. What year was that, Bob? It was like 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
A long time ago. Yeah.
Why do you still look the same age? How do you not age?
I've used this gray hair rinse that covers up the dark roots.
Oh man, you seriously look the same. You look like you're you're in your early 50s, like 51, 52.
There you go. Keep talking. We can do this all day. Yeah.
Do you remember? So yeah, you interviewed me for the Business Leaders podcast.
Yep.
Probably 6 or 7 years ago, at least. And by the way, yeah, Bob does have his own podcast for the listeners. Let's get that out there right now. businessleaderspodcast.com. That must have been, a long time ago. And I'm trying to remember how we connected, who introduced us.
Through Mark.
Are you sure? Because I thought I introduced Mark to you.
Could have been. I'm not, maybe through LinkedIn, but what I remember is we were chatting, and you guys have the record for being the fastest adoption and launch podcast. I think we talked on a Thursday, and you guys were up and running on Monday. And I'm going like, these guys don't let any dust settle around here. But yeah, you guys got going quick.
Well, it was such a great idea. For the listeners, everybody probably knows Riderflex is a recruiting and consulting firm, recruiting and staffing. And your suggestion was for me to start giving advice, career advice, job interviewing advice. And then it just naturally flowed into me then interviewing executives and entrepreneurs, getting their tips around that. And then it just grew from there. So anyway, I just wanted to say right up front, thank you. But Bob is what we call the godfather of the podcasting, and you can check his podcast out at Business Leaders Podcast. So be sure to do that. But anyway, let's start personal, man. How are things? Give me the family update. Wife, kids, grandkids. What's the latest? Share it with the listeners.
The bride is still teaching Tai Chi, so that's awesome. She's like a decade into it and absolutely obsessed with it. Cool. So that's good. Cool. Daughter's doing extremely well in Denver with digital marketing. Son is working out of Dallas. He's married, no grandkids yet. The daughter is morphed from having a black belt going into CrossFit. And I got a text from son today saying he just squatted 500 pounds or something. So I'm going to have to be polite when I see him next. And I've got my new 17-month-old bird dog sitting under my desk here at the office. So the bird dog will be going out in the field with me this fall. And so that'll be a lot of fun. So she's office dog, comes every day. So
you must have had it. Would you have do you have a long-term bird dog that moved on to the next life and you got a new one? Is that what happened?
yeah, yeah, I had one for 15 years, same breed. And we picked this one up, a year and a half or so ago. Same breed, same breeder, whole bit. And
Okay.
yeah, Maddie is her name. So she's a field springer. And
okay.
yeah.
Very good. Very good. How long you been married, Bob? You don't mind me asking?
I'm sneaking up on 40 years this year.
So you got married when you were 10.
Exactly right. Yeah, my wife has a good sense of humor, obviously, but yeah, so, it's funny, I came to Colorado from the deep South and stationed at Fort Carson as an Army officer and said, I'll be here 4 years and gone. Well, that was that's a long time ago. And married a local gal. And here I am, all these years later. And it's just really unusual, I think. For my plan was to live on a lake back in the South and do a lot of fishing. But Colorado's not a bad second choice for sure.
Were you from Tennessee originally, or whereabouts?
Yeah, I was born in Naples, Italy. My father was Navy. And then we moved all over the South, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, when I was a kid. And went to school outside of Nashville, a little school called MTSU. And then the Army had a plan for me. And after a stint at airborne school and a couple other places, ended up at Fort Carson during the Jimmy Carter years. So
how about that? So you got your degree and then went into the Army as an officer, as a lieutenant, and then got a few promotions in there to captain.
Yep. Ended up as a captain, stuck around for 6 years in reserves, and kind of like a booster shot on why I left. I'd go back for 2 weeks and go, I remember now why I left. And I really left the military. It wasn't very entrepreneurial. Once you make captain, it was 8 years to major. And I said, well, that's too dadgum slow for me. And so rotated out. And, that started my entrepreneurial journey. Working for a couple of the folks, worked for Merrill for 20 years and Morgan for a few, and then started our own firm here. And so we've been doing this independent since 2011. So
well, let me ask you, so you were in the ROTC though, at Middle Tennessee State. Now, was that you kind of following your father's footsteps? You wanted to go to the service. Was that driven by what your dad did for a living?
My dad was Navy. And so I had an opportunity for an ROTC Army scholarship. And I said, well, I'd really rather go Navy. In those days, I wanted to be a flight surgeon or a surgeon. And so I talked to Vanderbilt, talked to some crusty NCO, and he said, nah, we don't take 2-year transfer students up here, click. And I got a call back the next day from the head of the department, said, we'd love to have you. And I said, too late, already signed on the ROTC for the Army. So I missed the Navy by 1 day.
Really interesting. Yep. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Was your dad, so let's see. I'm going to guess your dad was born in the 20s. Am I close?
Yeah, he was a World War II vet. Served in the Pacific, air traffic controller. In fact, the Intrepid, which is up in New York in the harbor up there, is the ship he served on later on.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So it's a little bitty aircraft carrier compared to the ones nowadays. But yeah, he was an air traffic controller all his life.
So let's see, adolescent, teenager during the Depression, and then a World War II vet. Well, those guys, different breed, huh?
I got supervised a lot. Good Navy NCO. Yes, I got supervised a lot, but, he and I were really, really good friends. And so we did a lot of fishing all over the deep South, and we fished down in Okeechobee down in Florida and whatnot. And my mom died when she was really young in 78. Oh. And so he was single for the last part of his life. And so we hung out a lot. So he was a lot of fun to be around with. Yeah, nice guy. Cool.
Well, yeah. What'd your mom pass of? How old was she?
She was 48, glioblastoma, brain tumor. Yeah.
Bummer. Oh, that's a killer. Oh, yeah. So he never remarried, huh?
Nope. I think once was plenty for him, and yeah, he and mom got along. She was a gem. So he just never found anybody else, and he was unruly. So
Well, were you a good kid? Like when you were in high school, I mean, was it, straight A's by the book? You do, or did you get in any trouble? Did you do anything cool, Bob? Anything fun you want to share?
I was the new kid. I was in a different school every year after the sixth grade. And so I was new, slow, and small. And in the deep South, that's a deadly combination. You didn't play sports, and this, that, the thing I did do though is I water skied. And
Okay.
and so I tricked, jumped, barefooted, slalom skied, all that stuff. It's the one thing I could do as an athlete. And then right after high school, I gained 4 inches and 40 pounds, and so I got big real quick after high school, which, but and then I found I was good at water skiing. And I was a pre-med kid that made a D in organic chemistry, never made a D in my life. Took it again, made a D again. So it was trying to tell me something. And I am absolutely thrilled that I didn't go the pre-med route.
Okay. But you did major in biology though, right?
Biology and math. Yeah.
What were you going to do with that, Bob? What was the plan?
Oh, I'd worked at a local hospital when I was in Tennessee as a teenager. And we had a local surgeon in a small community hospital in Tennessee, and he would narrate surgeries for me. And I worked in there as an orderly when they had them, and he'd do, gallbladder removals and this and that and the other. And so he knew I was interested, but I was going to go to med school. I wanted to take it and go and be a doctor in those days.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you, siblings?
Yeah. I got one sister. She's still down there, still lives right, within 10 miles of where we grew up. And she starts talking and the banjos go off. I mean, she has a very deep Southern twang.
Cool.
Still.
That's cool. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Okay. So, but you go to the service, you get out of the Army after a nice run there as captain. How the heck with a biology degree and then your time in the Army, boom, you go into the financial industry, I guess, the investment industry, I don't know, wealth management, however you want to classify. How'd that happen?
Well, it was really a bad detour. There was a company out of San Francisco called Career Seminars, and they were a recruiting firm for junior officers. And they introduced us to Procter & Gamble and Applied Materials and a bunch of companies. So they were a placement service for us. I had a friend that was selling for a local firm, oddly enough, motorcycle parts, tires, tubes, plugs, helmets, chains, all that stuff. And so he was making 50 grand a year doing that, working 9 to 2. And I was making like 8 grand a year as LT, and captain. I said, oh, that sounds good to me. And so I took the job. I'd never sold anything. I'd owned one motorcycle in my life. And I starved for the first 2 years. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I worked there for 2 more years and finally figured out, but I could see the writing on the wall. Computers were coming on board, this, that, and the other. And, I started reading after my first big tax bill. I got a wake up call. And so I started reading Forbes and Fortune and Wall Street Journal and all that stuff every day. And so I was really interested in it. And I got introduced to Merrill Lynch back in 87.
Married right in here?
I had just, we were married 3 years. I got hired by Merrill, and I found out same time my daughter was on the way.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to kind of get to, all right.
Oh, yeah. Right. And in those days, if you didn't pass the licensing test, Merrill would fire you in those days. And so I had no pressure whatsoever.
Is that not how it works now? You don't get fired?
I don't know what the rules are now. I mean, I've been a long time away from them. So it may be the same, but I don't know that for sure.
And wow, over 20 years there? 21 years? 22 years?
21 years at Merrill, left them in 08. Went on a competitive hire to Morgan Stanley for 2011 and just said, this is no longer for me. The corporate dance and structure was inconsistent with what I wanted to do. And so, yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Now, see, if I was looking at your resume as a recruiter and I didn't see past Morgan Stanley, let's say I was just looking at U.S. Army, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, I would think big corporate red tape, huge organizations is where you thrive, right? And how did the entrepreneurial small company thing come to mind? How'd that happen?
It's interesting. I thought much like you, go to Merrill Lynch, a lot of people in suits. I wore blue jeans and a pullover most of the time on the road when I was selling. And, came into Merrill Lynch and everybody wore a suit. And I go, God, smart people, big decisions. And I thought that somehow or another the clients magically appeared. Well, they don't, and so you have to go get them. Yes. And so I was doing the Philo approach, first in, last out. So I'd get up there, and first day at Merrill, I got there at like 4:30 in the morning, and there was no one there
except for the janitors.
No, nobody, nothing. I didn't even have a key. I had to wait around until to get a key. So I got in really early, and I just I worked, and so it was entrepreneurial in the fact that the harder you worked, the luckier you got.
Yes. So
I figured I'd outwork everybody, and so that's basically how that transpired. And you learned as you go. They had a corporate campus. They'd send you back for rudimentary things, but you had the analyst and all that business. So it's really a marketing event to survive. Failure rate at Merrill as a new advisor is really high, or at least it was in a day.
Oh, I bet it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was entrepreneurial. And what I found is I got fascinated by business owners. I admired them. I liked what they did. I could see the parallels. Like for me, I bought a storage facility back 20 years ago.
Okay.
Wanted to have a business as well. I've had a couple of other businesses along the way. In the oil field, water treatment, and this and that and the other. Along with that, had a farm. In fact, I just sold the last of my farm last year. Okay. And so I've always been entrepreneurial.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Yeah. Getting the experience of meeting a bunch of business owners. And of course, I guess a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners that were going through a transaction or were selling or cashing out or whatever, and then helping them and getting to know them. I'm guessing that happened a bunch in your career, I'm assuming.
It did. And, there was a pivot point for me, though. I had a really good friend that had a large company, and he had received a huge offer to buy the company out. And, it was like $80 million for the company. And was chatting with him, and he said, one of my kids said they want to run the company. He said, this is awesome. He was pretty flattered about it. And the kid took over the company. This guy went and started running around the countryside, doing all the things he'd not been able to do.
Right.
And the economic cycle turned, and the company went bankrupt in a short period of time. And, it's one of those things, go, how the hell did I let that happen to a good friend of mine on my watch? He wasn't a client, but I didn't tell him to do a minority share carve out. I didn't tell him to do any of that stuff. And so at that point, I heard about a thing called the Exit Planning Institute, and they've got a certified exit planning advisor designation. And so I went out and studied with those guys and got a certification, and it changed my vocabulary entirely.
I see.
So for the business owner, and you start talking, 80% of people's net worth, if they're small business owners, tied up in their business on average. Right. The stats are grim. The majority of business owners that come to market when they want to sell their company have a job, not a business. Many of them don't transact. And, after the sale, the ones that do make it to sale, they said roughly 3/4 of those business owners within 12 months wish they hadn't sold.
And have to go get regular jobs.
Or who they used to be is not who they're recognized for anymore. Or the company, which was basically a child of theirs, is being run differently or not like they would do it.
Right.
Or like the wife says, I married you for better or worse, not for lunch. So that really changed what I was doing and how I approach things and how I talk to business owners, and, how do we help them get ready? And then, how do we take and help them afterwards, to take and navigate post-sale? Because most of them are so busy selling their companies, that they don't have the time to think about stage 3.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And most of them aren't like super savvy investors. A lot of them didn't come from trust fund, family offices and things like that. So when they do, I'm guessing when they do sell, for a lot of them, it's the first time they've had real money to do something.
Yeah. And like for me, my experience, effectively, when I got competitively hired to Morgan Stanley, I effectively sold my book of business to Morgan Stanley effectively.
I see.
Right. And I got to see the contract the evening before I left. And so they had hired hundreds, if not thousands, of advisors. So they knew what to do. And this was a one-off for me. And so I've been on the side of doing a bad exit. And, I know what it feels like. And you go in retrospect, that was, uninformed or poorly prepared on my part. And so, with the business owners, you really look at them, and I've talked to some guys that are really well known in the exit world. John Warlow, he's got Built to Sell Radio. He's got a podcast as well. I said, "What's the biggest mistake business owners make when they transition?" He says, "Being in a hurry, feeling like they need to do something upon sale, and go, don't be in a hurry."
Don't be in a hurry. So let's talk about RS Asset Management, which you founded in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a co-founder, or was it just yours?
Yeah, I got a co-founder. Yeah, he was with me at Merrill. We've been working together, almost 20 years now.
Okay, so you guys are still working together.
Yep.
Your co-founder. What's his name?
Sean Solvey.
I don't think I've ever met Sean, but that's okay.
He's the race car driver in the practice. We have a race car in the practice too.
Oh, okay. All right. Is it just you and him running it together? You got a couple of associates, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we've got an assistant that helps us out and keeps us squared away. And so the culture is really good in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah. So I like it that way. Yeah.
Started in 2011. So 12 years, I guess. 12 years, right? Does that sound right? 12 years with the same co-founder. Good for you. Can you give us kind of the RS Asset Management overview, the commercial, the 2-3 minute commercial, 30-second commercial, if you don't mind? And before you do that, rsassetmanagement.com for the listeners.
Correct.
But give us the overview if you don't mind, Bob.
Yeah, for the practice, it's interesting. People say, "Well, what do you do?" And I go, "Well, what are you trying to do?" And go, "Okay, tell me what you want to do." And for me, I spend a lot of time just trying to figure out what's on their mind. What do you want to do? What's your revenue stream? And then I put it all on a mind map. And usually everything they have is on one single piece of paper, and usually the first time they've ever seen it. So what we try to do is frame and quantify their vision. So, it's basically, we define what they're trying to do, decide on a course of action, implement it, and then we try to defend it all across the way. Whether they take and do estate planning, which I don't do, I don't do the legal work, whether it's putting in an umbrella policy, which I don't do those to cover liability work. There's a lot of things that we talk to them about, but, as far as the investing side of the house, we don't really even get to that point until we figure out exactly what's important and, goals and dreams and, any of the advisors they may have. And there's a defined process that we go through for every client, and we present it and go, did we miss anything? And then we set a to-do list. In many cases we go, we have to de-risk your family first. We had an opportunity lately where we had a family that sold a business, and the property and casualty insurance for the business they sold was owned by the business they sold and not them. And they still retained ownership on the property. And so it looked like they weren't insured.
I see. Stuff like that.
Okay. And you look at that and you go, I don't do that. But I mean, holy smokes, that's a big hole in your bucket if you're not covered. Because it was a big part of the family asset. So anyways, I mean, so that really ends up, it sounds rather nebulous, but I guess I'm professionally nosy. And I really try to understand. And, we're not for everybody. And of course, everybody's not for us, kind of thing. But
what is your target? What is your target? Is it family offices? Is it small to medium-sized business owners headed towards a transaction? All the above? What's your target client?
The target client, it seems to be running in the $5 to $50 million proceeds of the sale crowd. Some of the business owners were fortunate to get a hold of before the sale, and go, okay, let's try to model what you're doing. And say, the question that I always say is it enough? And I go, I don't know. So what do you need? And so you go through that process and go, yeah, it looks like enough to me, net after tax. And so that's that business owner. Then we also get referred into business owners that are post sale.
Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
and so you go through and you go, simple advice: don't ever close a business on Friday, so you have to worry over the weekend for your wire. I mean, close on Sunday other than Friday, for God's sakes. I mean, and they all seem to close on Friday, you know.
Is it the millionaire? What about a Fortune 500 executive, C-level guy that's making $1 million a year that just has some cash in the bank, not going to sell a business, doesn't have his own business? Is that your client as well, or no?
We have those as clients as well, and much of the process remains the same, because they'll have a liquidity event if they have stock options on the other side, which most do.
Okay.
And what we're really interested in is, how do you take and go, everybody talks about index return, or, you need to take and perform with the market, but what if the client doesn't need that kind of performance? Or what if that's not in their risk tolerance? And so you design the program, to fit what their vision is and what their requirements are, and for the executive that's leaving, they have same questions. Is it enough?
Is it enough?
Is it enough? And then I always say to folks, what's your risk to ruin number? And I go, well, what's that? And I go, how far down can your portfolio go before you live differently?
Good question. Yeah.
And you go, well, you go through and go, it's this number based on this cash flow. And if you get to that number, I said, then there's something wrong. I said, if you get to that number, don't go past that number.
Okay. Are you, for layman's terms, I'm going to ask you some commoner questions here, so I apologize if I don't use the right language, but I'm guessing this will maybe relate with some of the listeners. Let's use myself for an example in Riderflex. Are you helping, let's say we're headed towards a sale. Are you helping me prepare the business for the sale of the amount of money and helping me get that ready, along with preparing me for what I'm going to do with my personal take from that and putting those funds? Is it both?
There are people much more qualified than I am that spend a lot of time working with consulting, going, feed starve analysis, looking at, do you have a business, or do you have the right butts in the right seats, those kind of things. I'm conversant in it, but I don't do that.
Okay. But when I get if I call you and say my check's going to be $5 million, I don't know what the hell to do with it. That's when I'm getting Bob involved.
Yeah. And if I had my preference, I would want to know beforehand, right? Okay. And go like, okay, this is what I think I'm going to get, and go, all right, well, let's try to frame this, and we'll do the whole interview process, and we'll break it out. So this is what I see. Is this what you see?
Okay.
So you can go, okay, that matches up with my goals. Or it could very well be I have no idea. I spent all my time running my business, and, I want to take and travel here. I want to own real estate there, and go, okay, how does this all fit? Okay. And they have legacy properties and all this kind of stuff. And so you go, how do they fit?
Very good. And then you can help me map that out. So I want to repeat back something here. So let's say my personal take is 10 million, which would be so awesome if I sold Riderflex for that kind of money someday. But anyway, let's say I had 10 million, right? Yeah. Then I would come to you and say, okay, Bob, here's my cash. Here's 10, let's say it's 10 million after tax.
Okay.
So here's my 10 million. My wife and I could live on as little as $150,000 a year. If you just make sure I get $150,000 a year coming my way after tax. That's my goal, and I don't want to have to work again. Boom. Then you can help me lay out the plan based on those parameters. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause what I try to do is go, okay, net after tax 150, gross it up for taxes. Let's say it's Colorado and you're in 35 or 30% bracket. And you go, okay, I need to have 30% more than 150. So you're running around 200 grand, right? Okay. 200 grand divided by 10 million is 2%.
So my money has to make at least 2% or more a year.
Yep. 2% net.
That's doable, right? I mean, that's not hard.
It's doable today for sure. If you look 2 years ago, when you in the treasury market, what was it? You'd go to a bank and you'd see a 1% CD for 10 years. You didn't go like, well, that's an IQ test. No, but nowadays, T-bills are north of 5.
Okay.
And so it would be for somebody like that in a hypothetical situation, what we're told by regulators, you got to talk about the courses of action, corporate bonds, money market, treasuries, stocks, all the various things. And you go, do they fit your risk parameter? So each person is an individual sport in that respect. So in the disclaimer world, this is not meant as a investment recommendation or that other stuff, but you can go through and establish the rate of return required. And then you go, okay, so let's say in your case, I need 150, right? Net. And you go, but I said, well, how much real estate do you own? What's a cash flow? And you can say, well, I own a couple pieces of real estate and it's cash flowing 50 grand a year. Mm-hmm. I said, so is the 150 exclusive or inclusive of the 50?
Okay. Yep. Gotcha. All right.
And then you start working backwards and pretty soon you kind of go, it'd be really hard to mess this up.
And are you the guy, and I know these are like very low level questions, so I apologize, but since this is not a financial podcast, I'm guessing we'll have some just regular Joe listeners. So I want to ask these questions. Are you also the person that says, okay, here's where we're going to put the money and this is what we're going to do with it? And then as things move along, you're turning dials, you're moving stuff, you're calling me saying, hey, by the way, that we had this much in gold or silver, and I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to do this. You're constantly managing it after that. Is that how that works?
Correct. Yeah, we buy research from a number of research firms, and we have a lot of the stuff that we've developed internally, and so, the notion that retirement, this will be heresy. I'm thinking, folks will say, well, if you got 40 years, this will work out really well. And I'm going like, well, I'm an optimist, but I don't think I got 40 years, And so, for me, I've been around since 87. We've seen a lot of different cycles, the dot-com crash in 2000, the great financial crisis, in 2008, COVID crash in 2000, whatever it is we got shaping up right now. And, the market cycles, sometimes you need to have more exposure to various asset classes and sometimes less.
Okay.
And so we make sure that we understand how much risk you can tolerate. Like the standard question, well, what's your risk tolerance? 10%. Okay, so if you have 10 million bucks and you're down $1 million on Tuesday, you're okay with that? And if the answer is no, well, then 10% is not your number.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Is part of the investment strategy real estate as well, or you stay away from that?
I don't do physical real estate. I do not.
Okay, all right.
I mean, personally, yes, but professionally, no.
Any reason why? Is that like a specialty kind of arm of it?
Yeah, that's I don't have a real estate license. It's not my. It's like I don't do brain surgery on the weekends either, and everybody's relieved. But for that, I can comment on it. And say, this is the percentage of your own net worth. Pretend that your allocation model suggested you wanted to own 20% of your 10 million in real estate. And you go, okay. And you look at it in, X number of years down the road, you go, it's now 30% of your portfolio. I said, are you comfortable having that allocation to real estate 10% more than, 50% more than you set out? And if it's not, then you go, okay, everybody has one or two pieces of property that don't perform. It's like they have a black cloud over them.
Yeah.
Whatever those are, that would be the candidate for trim.
Okay. Okay. Very good. And I apologize, I don't know how this works. Are you just paid how are you paid? How do you make money?
We are paid a flat fee. So, we typically pay up to $5 million. We charge 1%, and that's everything. Trading, custody, communication, research, all a little bit. If it gets over 5 million, we're at 0.8%. It's typically paid quarterly. Okay. So it's 0.8% paid quarterly. It's 0.2 per quarter. Right.
I see. So if you increase the value of my portfolio, that's a chance for you to make more money too.
Yeah. It's kind of like the ad on TV. We do better when our clients do better. Right? And conversely, we do less well when our clients don't do well. And so we're on the same sheet of music. We don't get paid for how many times we turn it over. so we don't get, I don't do commission business. I just don't.
What percentage of your clients are people that have recently come into money and need a wealth manager for the first time versus they're pissed off at their current guy they're using for money and they want to switch to you?
The pissed off guys usually come in cycles. Right after a big decline in the market, they're pissed. The typical, I got my letter from my advisor saying who could have seen it coming, and we apologize, but if you hang on, it'll come back. And that's usually when you get those folks. Here in the past 5 years, there's been a lot of business owners that we are working with, and it's a direct result of the tragedy in that family that I described earlier. I mean, it's as bad an event for that family and their employees that I've ever seen. It's just the family doesn't talk. I mean, it's dysfunctional. They work a generation to get it done. And so for me, it's kind of like a mission statement. A lot of these folks out here do not know that they have a job. They think they have a business.
That's such a great line. That's such a good one.
They don't know.
I have a really close mentor of mine that I used to work with, and could have sold for about 40 million. And then I think it was less than 8 years later, business shut down, filed bankruptcy and lost it all and just shut it down and got zero. And when I meet them for lunch or breakfast or whatever, it's still, it's a very deep, painful conversation. And what's interesting about it is they're still okay. Like they still have money, right? They're not like homeless or anything. Like they're still fine because they did well before that. But just having to live with knowing that they should have taken that offer and didn't. Oh man. Yeah.
And then I think for the business owner, you're really close and emotionally tied to the decision process.
Mm-hmm.
And as an outsider, you could go in there and, for lack of a better term, pot shot. You go like, well, what about this? What about that? Have you considered this? And, here are different ways to consider exit. And, for the standard kind of joke in our industry, what's a rich person not want to be is poor again. And I grew up as a Navy NCO's kid.
Yeah. I mean, right. Not a lot of money floating around at your house.
No, and bought my first car by mowing yards. And in fact, I still mow my yard. It reminds me.
That's a good idea. Oh, I like that. Speaking of that, not to get too personal, but I'm assuming you could retire right now if you wanted to and not work. Why are you still working, Bob?
I love what I do.
You just love it. Huh?
I like the people I work with. I mean, I can only hunt and fish so much, and so for me, I think next year I'm going to remote the practice to Alaska for a month and Florida for a month and just operate from there and fish.
That's great. Great.
I'm sitting in my office with my bird dog under the desk. I've got a pair of blue jeans on, cowboy boots.
Love it.
And, I'm down here all the time. It fascinates me.
That's good. That's good. And keeps you young, right? Keeps you young.
Yeah. I mean, you have to keep up with your clients. I've got some pretty bright clients, so I've got to run a little faster than they do. And so I get up earlier than they do typically. But yeah, I tell my wife, so they're going to haul me out of here feet first.
Speaking of hunting, by the way, have you been this year? Do you have a tag or what do you got going on?
I bird hunt mostly. And so season I shoot out at a hunting club east of town here. And,
okay. No elk, no moose. You don't do any of that?
Not this year. I've moose hunted in Canada and elk hunted down in New Mexico but I like watching the dogs work.
Yeah. Right. What you don't want to cut up 100 pounds of meat and pack it on your back 8 miles through the forest and no, that don't sound fun.
I've done that before. All the fun is done when you shoot. For sure.
Come on, Bob, you want to do that, right? You want to go back 5 trips, haul it to the ATV, then drive it to camp and then try to get back to the site before a bear's on it. I mean, come on.
I would do Canada again. I mean, I fished or hunted up there for moose, and I fished in Brazil.
Oh,
And
cool.
Brazil for peacock bass is the furthest away from civilization I've ever been. And Canada was next to that. And it's pristine out there. It's a real gift to be able to go.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I have a lot of, I'm not a hunter, but I grew up in Oklahoma. So I was all around it with my family and stuff, and, as you know, I go, camping and hiking and Jeep trail riding up in the mountains here in Colorado and Wyoming as much as I can. So I always see hunters this time of year, they're around up there. There's this very interesting transition for the listeners that aren't familiar with the area. In the summer, you have the families and the ATV riders and the RVs for the summer campers. And then right when school starts, it is almost like an immediate switch to hunters. Boom, that's it. You might see a family camping with kids, but rare. It's hunters from that point forward. Except for me, I go up and I'm with the hunters. Now, when I go up during that time of year, Bob, I'm super quiet. I try not to.
Mhm.
I don't want to mess them up, right? Yeah, I don't want to, because they get irritated if you're.
Oh yeah. But particularly, I remember the first time I really did elk hunting in Colorado. I hiked into this area and I was way up there and I got up there early in the morning. And first light, I look right across the draw. There's a guy looking at me through a scope across the thing, and I'm thinking,
yeah,
I'm in the wrong place.
Yeah. By the way, I have a cool little story for you from last weekend. So I was in Medicine Bow, by Medicine Bow Peak in Wyoming. For the listeners, that's southern Wyoming, right near the state line for Colorado. And I was doing some camping and mountain biking, and I was mountain biking on what I would call roads that are okay to do it without pissing off the hunters, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
I wasn't getting too far back in there to make them mad. But anyway, the interesting story. I was about 5 miles in, hadn't seen anybody for the day. Not very many people around, not as many hunters as usual. By myself. And Bob, I came across a fire pit that was trashed. People had left trash in. And I don't know about you, but I get so furious. It really just does something to me, and I'm always saying, okay, thank you, God, for not letting me see that person do that, because if I had, Kim might be bailing me out of jail. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm sitting here staring at this trash pit, but I was on my mountain bike and I was away from camp. So I didn't have a bag. I didn't have a trash bag or whatever, because normally if I'm in my Jeep, I'll just pull over and bag it up. Right. I'm sitting there and I'm pissed. I'm taking a picture of it and I'm thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to get this trash out of here? I was thinking, well, maybe I can just stuff it all in my pockets or whatever, but I didn't have enough room. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I'm just fuming. Anyway, make a long story short, the truck comes up this logging road, super thin, narrow, rocky logging road, right? Going super slow. I knew it was hunters. They get up right next to me. They're in their gear. And I could tell they hadn't seen the fire pit yet, but because they were concentrating on me, and they pull up right beside me. And I said, hey, you guys don't happen to have like a trash bag or something on you, do you? And I looked down over at the fire pit when I said that. And Bob, I shit you not, all three of those hunters got out of their truck immediately. All three of them got out. One of them grabbed a trash bag out of the back, and they all came over, and all four of us were picking that fire pit up. I mean, without hesitation, they were out of that truck within seconds. And I thought to myself, these are good people right here. Like these guys respect the area, respect the territory, and they were just like me. They were so mad.
It's a privilege to get up in the high country.
Yes.
And
yes.
The hunting is the excuse, and like we were talking about, after you shoot, the fun's done.
Yeah.
But you get up and it's quiet. And, you may be sitting there and there'll be a squirrel that will come down, or you'll see a turkey, or you'll see some other wildlife. And, you get to reconnect. And, there's a lot of psychological studies and stuff that talk about how nature is restorative and healthy and good for you. Like for me, when I go bird hunting, I don't care if I kill a bird. I want to watch the dogs. I go watch the dog show, and same thing for hunting. And for a lot of the folks, that have not grown up around that culture, You watch the hunting shows and there's some guy fist pumping, killing something out of a deer stand over a cornfield. And I'm going like, well, that ain't exactly it for me, but good on them for being out. But it's a tradition. The ranks of hunters are shrinking, which is unfortunate. But, you see the folks up there in the high country, by and large, they'll take in, you won't leave it better than you found it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Pick up stuff along the way, and the best mark up there is nobody knew you were there.
One more thing on this topic. Isn't it interesting too, when you're up in the high country, as you were mentioning, isn't it interesting how when you see a person, everybody waves, everybody's friendly, everybody says something. As soon as you come down the mountain into population, that stops.
Well, you have common ground if you're up there.
Yeah. That's right.
And then you get back in the city and you don't know, and that's unfortunate. But I've hunted, and for as long as I could drag a gun behind me. I think I was a little boy with the little BB gun as a kid. But I grew up in the South, so that's no surprise. Not
Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole on it, but what we're really talking about here is good people and just respecting nature and respecting the things around you. Because if you do that, if you do the right thing, it's amazing how good karma will usually come your way most of the time, right?
I saw a statement the other day. Is how you do anything is how you do everything. And so if you think about, you're a good steward of the people you work for, the people you place, and the businesses you serve. And you think about, so can you imagine being a good steward there, and they follow you up in the mountains and you're throwing stuff out your car window, and they go, there's a disconnect, right? Yes. And so you think about, you're here serving, you're not here for long, and you take care of, the resource. And your resource could be, a high quality C-suite individual. It could be the company that's looking for help in the, and you go, I'm here to take care of the quote troops. Like for me in the military, it was like, take care of the troops. You take care of them, they'll take care of you. And that's how it works.
That's right.
The same thing for you.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap up right there, Bob. I think good stuff. For the listeners, one more time, rsassetmanagement.com. Also, be sure to check out the Business Leaders Podcast. And if you are interested in being a guest on the show, I'm sure there's probably a connect button or a contact button there somewhere, right, Bob?
Yeah, and the thing that I paused my podcast for a while because I felt like I was going through the motions a little bit.
Okay.
And so what I'm really heading toward now is I want to take and start talking to the business owner that sold somewhat recently. And I'm interested in understanding their journey, their concerns, and their aha moments again. What did they do? How did they approach it? What was successful? There are some folks that do it really, really well.
Yes.
There are some that do it really poorly, and kind of like to get their stories out to help the other business owners. So that's going to be the group of folks that I'm going to be trying to talk to, in the future. Yeah.
Very good. And Bob Roark also on LinkedIn. And if you search for Bob Roark, and there's a million of them, just try the greater Colorado Springs area. He's that good looking guy with the silver hair. You'll see him there. That's the profile you need to click on.
Perfect. Good looking guy. I like it.
Bob, thanks for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your journey. I really appreciate it.
It has been way too long. And, again, of all the folks out there, you guys have just killed it in the podcast space. I'm really proud of the success that you guys have had doing it.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.